Hello guys, I'm Eunjae from Elena to share and welcome back. Today's video will be about the ancient philosopher Confucius. Now, we do not have many facts about the precise dates of Confucius's life, but as the documents tell us, Confucius was born in 551 BCE in Khufu, which was in the state of Lu, which is nowadays in the Shandong province of China. During this period of time, Lu was under the reign of the Zhou dynasty. He starts his teaching career at 520 BCE. And then, at 497 BCE, he leaves Lu and starts wandering around China and spreads his teaching to different states. And then he died in 479 BCE back in Lu. And first of all, I would like to introduce the Confucian values to you, or at least some of it. And the first value is Ren. Ren is the virtue that stands at the center of the theories of Confucius. This trait, although there's no English word that can hold the exact same definition of Ren, the closest one would be the word altruistic. Ren asks for love, to love others like you would love yourself and treat them equally. This is what is considered as the virtue that makes one humane, and this is what stands not only at the center of Confucianism, but also at the center of all men. The next value is Li. Li is a much more abstract value compared to Ren. We sometimes define it as simply being polite, but there's more to it. Li is one way that we can practice Ren, and is also an interaction and harmony between men and society. And there are more definitions and interpretations of Li. The last virtue that I'll introduce you in this lecture is Da. This is usually translated as morality or moral character, and this is the trait that distinguishes humans from any other animals and is a very general idea. And before we move on to political theory of Confucius and the ideal state that Confucius tells us, we first need to understand how it defined the nature of men. For my very first video, which was on social contract, I gave you the social contract theories and a definition of the state of nature made by 3 Western philosophers. If you had seen that video, then you might be familiar with this concept of the state of nature. But if you did not see that video and would like to know more about these theories, you can always go back to my very first video. But for today's lecture, it wouldn't really affect your understanding. Thomas Hobbes defined the state of nature as the war of all against the all. Locke's state of nature was summarized as a state of complete freedom where one is capable of controlling one's actions with reason, and Rousseau's state was dominated by interactions of indifference. Although they had different ideas on the state of nature itself, what they all had in common was that all men shared those same characteristics. But it is a little different from Confucius. He believed that humans were born with different natures. Some are dumb from nature, some are smart from the nature, and some are in between, not so dumb, but also not that smart. He added that those who are dumb or smart from the nature cannot be changed, but for those who are neither smart nor dumb, can transform after discipline and learning. But after the society has been formed, Confucius then divided the people into two again. One is Zhunzi, which is gentleman or the ideal person, and the other is Xiaoren, which means small person when translated. And what distinguishes those two is that Zhunzi cares for the good of all, but a Xiaoren will care for the interest of oneself only. Now we know that the differences from nature exist between the people in the theory of Confucius. And now, keeping this in mind, let's look at what Confucius emphasized for his Confucian state. At the time, Confucius was highly concerned that personal interest and greed, along with the former concept of Li, will cause confusion of the social norms and bring chaos. So, he emphasized that we will have to go beyond our personal interest in goods and bring back the fundamental virtue of Li. In the previous video, I talked about the concept of a philosopher king, the idea that the ruler should be the one who is highly educated and has the desire to learn and has achieved the understanding of the good that should govern the state. Similar to this idea of a philosopher king by Plato, Confucius also believed that a virtuous leader must govern the state. And to become a virtuous leader, one had to learn and practice those virtues. He also stated that a rightful governing must hold moral politics as its ideals. That that the leader should not punish the citizens, but use Da and Li to govern the people and lead them the right way. When the leader governs with Da, then the people will also advance accordingly, eventually making a peaceful state with the spread of Da. This idea was actually practiced. The seventh emperor of Han Dynasty, the Emperor Hanwu, adopted Confucianism as the philosophy of the state, and the Chinese emperors from then had to learn Confucianism. To learn Confucianism and become a virtuous ruler, they had to take classes from a Confucian teacher from a very young age. And then, after when they actually became emperors, they still had to take classes from Confucian scholars regularly. And this effort to create virtuous leaders were not only applied to the emperors. The officers who worked for the emperors also had to learn and practice Confucianism too. Today, we talked about the political philosophy of Confucius. And before we dived into the political theory itself, we looked at the three virtues, Ren, Li, and Da, which are emphasized in the theories of Confucianism. Then we learned how Confucius defined the state of nature. We found out that Confucius believed that each human were born with different natures, and then we moved on to see the idea of a Confucian state, that a virtuous leader should govern the state. And then we looked at the example where the Confucius state was actually applied, the example of Han Dynasty. Personally, I thought that this idea of a virtuous leader was quite similar to the concept of a philosopher king by Plato. What do you think? If this video was helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you in another video.